Hello everyone, wishing you all good health, peace, and the kind of love that makes even ordinary days feel extraordinary. For years, Tieu carried the burden of raising two children on her own. Her strength hidden in sleepless nights and her smile masking silent tears. She never asked for help, never dreamed of miracles, yet fate had its own gentle plan. CEO, man of quiet power and heart longing for family, stepped into their lives. Moment came softly, almost unexpectedly, when the two little ones looked up at him with innocent eyes and called him Dad. His heart fluttered, breaking down walls he never knew he had, and beside him, Tieu smiled. Because in that single word their broken pieces finally began to fit together. The morning sun filtered gently through the thin curtains of the small house, casting a soft glow over the wooden floor where two little children were playing. Their laughter was light like bells in the wind, filling every corner of the home that had once been too quiet, too heavy with struggle. For years, Tieu had carried the weight of being both mother and father. At only 18, her days were woven with exhaustion, her nights with silent tears. She had learned to cook with hand while holding a baby in the other, to mend clothes long after midnight, to smile at her children even when her heart was breaking. Her love was her only wealth, and she poured it into them without hesitation. But everything changed the day Hung entered their lives. He was not just a man of success and power, not just the EO whose name carried respect. With Tieu and the children, he was simply Hung, the man who carried firewood to their door, who knelt down on the floor to fix broken toys, who bought fruit at the market just to see the children's faces light up. One evening after a long day, he came to visit. The children ran toward him, their little feet pattering against the floor. Without hesitation, the boy tugged his hand and said, "Dad, play with me." The word hung in the air, so natural, so innocent, yet it struck Hung's heart like wave. He froze, his breath caught in his chest. Dad. It was a word he had never expected, yet in that moment it felt truer than anything he had ever been called. His eyes softened, warmth rising to his throat, and when he looked up he saw Tieu standing in the doorway. She wasn't startled, nor did she rush to correct the child. Instead, gentle smile touched her lips, smile that carried gratitude, tenderness, and something deeper she had been too afraid to name. For the first time, Hung realized that this little home with its patched roof and simple meals was more precious than all the wealth he had ever known, and for the first time, Tieu allowed herself to dream. Not of surviving alone, but of building family together. That evening lingered in Hung's memory long after he left the small house, the sound of the boy's voice calling him Dad replayed in his mind, not as an echo, but as promise. He had built skyscrapers, led companies, and signed contracts worth millions, but nothing had ever made his heart tremble the way that single word had. The next morning he found himself arriving earlier than usual. He carried fresh bread from the bakery and bag of milk, as if it were the most natural thing to do. The children greeted him with joy, their tiny hands pulling him inside. "Dad, look, I drew you," the little girl said, holding up crayon picture. In it, 4 stick figures stood together under bright sun. 2 small children, woman with long hair, and beside her, tall man with wide smile. Hung stared at the drawing, his throat tightening. He turned his gaze toward Tieu Ca, who was folding laundry quietly at the table. She avoided his eyes, her cheeks faintly pink, but he caught the softness in her expression. Later, when the children had fallen asleep, Hung remained on the porch with her. The night air was cool, the stars scattered like diamonds across the sky. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the faint chirping of crickets. Finally, Hung spoke, his voice low and steady. "Tieu Ca, do you ever think about what it would be like if we were family? Not just you and the children, but me too." Her hands tightened around the cup of tea she was holding. She had imagined it, of course, more times than she could admit, but fear had always silenced her. She knew what it was like to be left behind, to be disappointed. "I think about it," as she whispered, "but thinking is easy, living is harder." Hung turned to her, his eyes searching hers with sincerity she could not look away from. "Then let me show you that it doesn't have to be hard. Let me stand beside you. Let me be their father." Not just in their words, but in truth. Her heart raced, torn between caution and the fragile hope blooming inside her, and though she did not answer that night, her silence was not rejection. It was the beginning of something she could no longer deny. Days turned into weeks, and in those quiet stretches of time, Hung's place in their lives grew naturally, like roots finding their way into the soil. In the mornings, he sometimes arrived before dawn, helping Tieu light the firewood and prepare breakfast. He would lift the children into his arms, spinning them around until their giggles filled the small house. At night, he read them stories by the dim glow of the lamp, his voice deep and steady until their eyelids fluttered. closed against his shoulder. One evening, as they all sat together at the dinner table, the little boy clumsily tried to scoop rice into his bowl. He spilled half of it, his face crumpling in frustration. Without word, Hung leaned over, steadying the boy's hand with his own, but slowly he said softly, "You see? You can do it." The child's frown melted into smile, and he whispered, "Oh, thank you, Dad." The word no longer startled Hung. It settled in his chest like it had always belonged there, but when he looked across the table and saw Tieu Ca's eyes shining with unshed tears, he realized how much it meant to her too. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Hung lingered. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. Tieu was tiny shirts, her hands moving with practiced care, though her thoughts seemed far away. "You're doing so much," Hung said gently, breaking the silence, "but you don't have to do it all alone anymore." She paused, her fingers tightening around the fabric. "I've been alone for so long, I don't know how to share this life with someone else." Hung stepped closer, his voice almost whisper, "Then let me learn with you. Not as the CEO people know in the city, not as a guest who comes and goes, but as a man who wants to belong here with you, with them." Her breath caught. She lifted her gaze, and for a moment their eyes met under the soft light of the lamp. She saw no pity, no fleeting kindness, only steady devotion, the kind she had long thought she would never find. And though the words stayed unspoken, her faint, trembling smile told Hung everything. She was beginning to believe in him. The seasons shifted slowly, and with them, so did the rhythm of their lives. What once had been a house of struggle now carried the warmth of laughter. The neighbors began to notice, whispering among themselves about the city man who seemed rooted now in their village, always beside the young mother and her 2 children. But with whispers came doubts. One afternoon at the market, as Tieu bargained for vegetables, she overheard 2 women. "She's lucky," one said, "but how long it lasts? Man like him doesn't stay in small house forever." "Oh, exactly," the other replied. "He'll leave and she'll be left with broken dreams again." The words struck deep, echoing fear she tried to bury. That night, after putting the children to bed, she sat alone on the porch, staring at the quiet sky. She didn't hear Hung approach until he placed shawl gently over her shoulders. "You're trembling," he said softly. "It's just the night air," she whispered, but her voice was unconvincing. Hung crouched beside her, his eyes searching hers. "No, it's not. Something's on your mind." Her hands tightened around the shawl. Finally she spoke, her voice raw. "Everyone says you'll leave one day, that men like you don't stay, and I can't let the children lose someone they've already started to love." Silence hung between them, heavy as the night. Then Hung reached for her hand, firm and certain. "Tieu Ca, listen to me," he said, his voice trembling with honesty. "I've lived in cities filled with lights and wealth. I've sat in offices at the top of glass towers, but none of it has ever felt like home. He glanced toward the small house where the children slept soundly. "This is where my heart is. With you, with them, I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes widened, glistening with tears she couldn't hold back. Hung took breath, his chest rising with the weight of the words he had held inside for too long. "I love you, Tieu Ca. I love the way you fight for your children, the way you smile even when you're tired, the way you make this little house warmer than any mansion could ever be. Let me stay. Let me be their father. Let me be the man who stands beside you for the rest of our lives." The night seemed to pause. The crickets, the wind, even the stars, as if the world itself was holding its breath for her reply. Tieu Ca's lips trembled, but then slowly curved into smile, tender, full of hope. Maybe it's time I stopped being afraid." Hung pulled her into his arms, holding her as though he'd found the piece of himself he'd been missing all along, and for the first time in years, Tieu felt not just strong, but safe. "Life often asks us to carry more than we think we can bear." At 18, Tieu learned this too soon. She raised 2 children with hands that were never given rest, with a heart that had to be stronger than her years. Her world was small, measured by meals, sleepless nights, and worries about tomorrow. Yet within that struggle lay truth. Even the smallest flame of love can keep soul alive in the darkest times. When Hung entered her life, he did not erase her burden with wealth or promises. Instead, he offered presence, patience, and steady hand. What changed Tieu Ca's life was not the power of EO, but the constancy of man who chose to stay again and again. Love, she discovered, is not always grand gestures. It is bringing firewood on cold night, reading bedtime stories, holding another's hand when doubt whispers too loudly. The lesson is simple but profound. Strength does not mean carrying everything alone. Strength is allowing others to stand beside you, to share both the weight and the joy. And love, when it is real, does not demand. It builds, it protects, it waits until trust can bloom. From Tieu Ca's story, we learn that family is not only formed by blood, but also by choice. Man who chooses to love children as his own becomes father in truth, and woman who dares to open her heart again after pain discovers that healing begins where fear ends. The greatest victories in life are not measured by wealth or status, but by the quiet moments when love turns house into home. What makes Tieu Ca's journey so meaningful is not only her courage, but also her willingness to trust again. Many people live behind walls built from past pain, afraid to open the door to new beginnings, but Tieu showed us that healing begins the moment we allow light to enter. Her story reminds us that love is not about perfection. Hung was not flawless, and neither was she, yet in their imperfection, they found something far greater: acceptance. Accepted her scars, her struggles, her children as his own. She accepted his heart, not as promise of rescue, but as partner in building future. The lesson for us is clear. Happiness does not arrive all at once. It grows slowly with patience, faith, and small acts of kindness. To raise children alone is heavy, but to raise them with love and then to let another share in that love is triumph of the spirit. So when life feels unbearable, when the road seems steep, remember Tieu Ca's smile, remember Hung's steady devotion, remember that the story of family is not just written by blood, but by the hearts that choose to stay. And in the end, the question is not, is it hard, but is it worth it? For love that heals and strength that lasts, the answer will always be yes.